Welcome to the Hoxhunt Human Risk Management Podcast, where we discuss all things human risk management. Today, we'll be talking about what we saw and heard at RSA 2025 in San Francisco, and I'll be discussing that with my esteemed colleague, our VP of Strategy, Noura Ahmed Moshe. Noura, so glad to have you here.
It's great to be here with you.
So, RSA 2025 was packed with trends, noise, people, and a few truly meaningful insights. Today, we're cutting through the noise with Noura, and we're going to get deep into what she saw and the insights that she and I both got from RSA 2025 by talking to so many different people who came to our booth and who we visited at various places. So, we'll get into that, but first, the Hoxhunt Cyber News Roundup. CrowdStrike released their global threat report, and three findings stood out. First, voice phishing, or Vishing attacks, which is a form of social engineering attack where bad actors call victims to amplify their malicious activities, saw explosive growth. There was a 442% increase in Vishing attacks between the first and second half of 2024. Second, breakout time, which is how long it takes for an adversary to start moving laterally across your network, reached an all-time low in the past year, and low means fast in this case, and fast means dangerous. The average fell to 48 minutes, and the fastest breakout time they observed dropped to a mere 51 seconds. And third, initial access attacks boomed, accounting for 52% of vulnerabilities observed by CrowdStrike in 2024. Providing access as a service became a thriving business as advertisements for access brokers increased 50% year over year. The Verizon DBIR 2025 came out before RSA in April. Each year, Verizon releases their Bible of data breaches for security leaders who are seeking practical insights and guidance, and this year's findings were especially robust with regards to the human element. And heads up, Hoxhunt is hosting a live webinar with Phil Langlois, Verizon's lead data scientist and a DBIR co-author, on how to leverage the DBIR to level up your security awareness program. So the overarching takeaway is that the human element is still the dominant factor in data breaches, being involved in 60% of data breaches. Credential abuse and social engineering, especially phishing and MFA prompt bombing, are the primary drivers. Training impact. Recent training quadruples phishing reporting rates to 21% versus 5% without recent training. Click rates improved less, but reporting is now the critical metric. This is a huge find, and we are so happy that reporting rate has made its way into the industry's top report as a key metric for training effectiveness. Generative AI risks. Malicious use of synthetically generated text and phishing doubled, plus 15% of employees access Gen AI from corporate devices, with 72% using personal emails exposing policy gaps. Exploited vulnerabilities. Now the number 2 attack vector responsible for 20% of breaches, particularly through edge devices and VPNs. Third-party risk. 30% of breaches involve third-party software or vendors. This is now a structural, systemic problem, not isolated mistakes. And finally, for the Cyber News Roundup, the NIST 2 Directive implementation in the EU. The EU is rolling out new NIST 2 cybersecurity rules requiring critical industries to adopt risk management practices and report breaches. These rules expand regulatory exposure for mid-sized and large enterprises across digital, finance, healthcare, and more. That's it for the Cyber News Roundup. Now on to today's topic. So, I am Elliot Baker. I'm the Director of Content Marketing here at Hoxhunt, and this was my third year in a row at RSA. And it was my pleasure, nay, my honor, to attend RSA this year with Noura Ahmed Moshe, our VP of Strategy. And Noura, tell us a little about yourself and what your just general impressions were of being at RSA this year.
Great. Thank you, Elliot. And yes, we did indeed have a great time at RSA together. So yes, hi, I am Noura Ahmed Moshe. I'm the VP of Strategy and Operations here at Hoxhunt. And RSA was a full-on experience as it is. This was my second RSA in a row, actually. And I think I was expecting the sort of high-octane kind of experience, which it really is. It's obviously the largest and the most well-attended cybersecurity conference globally. I think there were about 44,000 people there. And it wasn't just people, because we saw goats, we saw puppies, we saw animals at booths, because I think, as is the nature with us humans, we always feel like we need to sort of raise the stakes to get attention each year. So there's a lot of noise and a lot of extra stuff there to sort of cut through. But despite the animals, connecting with people was really my highlight at RSA, as it is with most conferences that I attend. At Hoxhunt here, we are based in our headquarters here in Helsinki in Finland, but we're very globally connected. So I had the chance actually to have proper conversations with people that I've known online for some time, that I've connected with, make new connections, hang out with some of our clients, some industry friends. And I think those are the conversations where you really learn the most, when you have the time to sit down with people over a drink or a coffee, and you really understand what's going through their minds. So all in all, RSA was a great experience for me. Obviously, I'm sure we're going to get into talking about AI, and I was counting the seconds here right now, how long I could go without mentioning AI. So I deliberately left it a couple of minutes. But yeah, I think AI, of course, dominated the conversations. But AI, at the end of the day, is just a new technology which is used by people. So people were definitely my highlights.
Every year at RSA, there's a new buzzword. You see it at the different booths, you hear it being spoken at the different keynotes. A couple of years ago, it was ransomware. It's all that people wanted to talk about. Everybody suddenly became ransomware protection, and didn't really matter what the technology was. All of a sudden, you were defending against ransomware. And then for the last 2 years, but really this year, I fully agree, every vendor said that they were AI this or AI that, and whether they were or not. So clearly AI was the big theme this year, but I would completely agree with what you were saying there earlier, Nora, is that whether it's talking about ransomware prevention and protection, whether you're talking about AI, the real power and the real value of RSA are the human connections that you get there. It's a chance for people who have maybe been thinking about working with something so different that like Hoxhunt represents to them, when they've been working with, let's say, a legacy security awareness tool. Now they can actually meet the people who were behind the product. And likewise, we can meet people who have been working with us, or people who we've followed on LinkedIn, different thought leaders, people who we just admire as analysts or as CISOs or as security awareness leaders. So I fully agree with you that some of the best conversations were not sales conversations. They were just understanding what people were dealing with, what people were seeing, and just saying hello. Maybe going over to the Sky Bar and having a drink afterwards, and really kind of getting a personal connection to people that you just can't get over a camera.
Yeah, definitely agree with that.
So in your conversations, Nora, and you had a lot, you're such a personable person. Everybody likes Nora, and everybody has a nice conversation with Nora. What were some of the themes that came up? Maybe the things that people were struggling with. What types of themes were prevalent in the conversations about what were people's challenges?
So with obviously the rise, or the sort of pivotal moment in disruption that's happened really between last year and this year. I mean, obviously for the last couple of years, the development of AI has been, very fast. But I think, there's a distinct difference between this year and last year, particularly in terms of talking about agentic AI. And I think one of the reasons I love working in cybersecurity is because we have such a diverse, varied, competent group of people with varied competencies, coming from, so many different angles, and looking at cybersecurity problems through so many lenses. And so, of course, like we talk about agentic AI, how it's used by attackers and how it's used for malicious purposes as well as for defense. And when it's really, truly meaningful and useful to use it, and when it is like a buzzword or, kind of tacked on thing, or at worst, when it's also becomes a risk unintentionally in-house. So I think a lot of concerns for security personnel who are generally more up on technology than your average employee in any given company. I think there's a lot of concern around how employees are using AI. So not just how attackers are using it and how we can sort of develop the security tools. And I think that's sort of, that's obviously on the human side of risk, which is, as you pointed out, accounts for 60% or so of breaches and is, by far the majority of breaches come in through the human layer. And now that layer is using another tool that many don't know enough about. And so I think that is there's a lot of uncertainty. Like security people love to have the control and, patch things, and humans are hard to patch. So I think that is a lot of the sort of conversations that I was having. And I think you mentioned also in the DBIR context, the trending yet not quite as sexy sounding word as AI, third-party risk. And I think it's all very directly interlinked, because I think third-party risk and having so many tools and different technologies in the ecosystem is something that keeps a lot of people up at night. And I think third, the humans that work in security and how it is for them when everything is moving so fast. I think we know that we need more and more people to work in cybersecurity because the risks aren't going anywhere, quite the opposite. And we know that it's largely a very stressful job. So a lot of the conversations I was having as well were about the resilience and well-being of the people that actually work in security, and how might we impact positively their well-being so that we can continue to work together against these evolving threats.
Those are a lot of really great points and a lot of great insights into the conversations and the temperature that was taken of the various people who were, whether they were visiting the Hoxhunt booth or whether we were having conversations outside. I think that covers quite a bit of the trends and topics that were happening there. And one thing I wanted to kind of double click on a little bit is the idea of agentic AI. I can say for sure that last year and the year before, I didn't have a single conversation on that topic, but that actually came up a couple of times where I was talking to people, and Hoxhunt released research recently that made a bit of a splash in the media as well about an AI spear phishing agent that Hoxhunt developed that outperformed elite human red teams for the first time in March of 2025. And when we were talking about that type of research finding and the fact that the threat landscape is going to change very soon with the application of agentic AI to different threat actors who are going to be able to automate spear phishing and make spear phishing the new normal, I think that's something that people were concerned about. And it was something that people had seen to some degree, that the fact that attacks were getting more sophisticated. I think that it's not quite where you might feel like it would be based on anecdotal media reports, where there are some really sophisticated attacks that have been carried out using everything from Vishing to deepfakes to highly sophisticated email chains and various AI agent bots that carry on a whole conversation with you. But it is improving a lot. And that's a conversation people were very much wanting to have, is how do you integrate AI into a defensive strategy?
Yep, and I also had quite a few conversations about our AI spear phishing agent, which is our, first agentic AI feature in the product, if you like. And I think it's really insightful to hear different people's reactions to ensuring that we keep employees trained on the latest threat landscape, or the threats that are trending in the landscape rather. But there's also quite a lot of fear around introducing these new methods on the defense side, because there's a lot of there is a lot of psychological stuff going on with humans when it comes to AI. There's a lot of misunderstanding and fear, but I think the fact is that we know that the attackers will be using those technologies, and if we don't ensure that we keep people up to date on understanding what types of attacks they can face, then of course, it may be too late by the time they get to them. And I think video deepfakes is another interesting issue, because I think that scares people a lot, because I think there's a sort of feeling that it will get out of hand and soon we're not going to know who's who anymore, and it will get so sophisticated. So I think deepfakes is a continuing, obviously that's a conversation that's been going on for a while, but I think it's definitely a continuing concern. But deepfake audio, even way more than deepfake video, I think is a real today problem for a lot of security leaders. It's, as we know, causing a lot of incidents, and a lot of the threat landscape is utilizing that. But I think that is a technology that's also occupying a lot of people's minds based on the conversations at RSA.
Fully agree. Yeah, there were numerous conversations where people really wanted to see what kinds of training there was around vishing, and because they had, multiple, whether it was phone calls or phone messages. A phone message is incredibly easy to do with a phishing voice message. You can do that with just a couple of swipes through the App Store, and you can all of a sudden sound like Nicolas Cage or Morgan Freeman, and it's incredibly easy to do that. Not to mention the CEO of a company who might have just had one single speaking appearance. And also what I thought was interesting was that I had a lot of people who were wondering about beyond email. How do you get people to stay vigilant when they're not just opening an email, but they're also in their WhatsApp especially, which is interesting because I think that no company actually has WhatsApp as an official communications channel, but they're smart. And this is what people do. People do share information on WhatsApp, or your official phone might be used for some personal use, and WhatsApp is one of the key uses there. So whether it's vishing, whether it's deepfakes, and whether it's sort of omnichannel, getting beyond email type phishing, a lot of those type of conversations there's a lot of recognition that the game has changed, and not only that it has changed, but it will change very dramatically, very quickly, year over year.
Definitely.
So putting you on the spot a little bit here, what was one conversation you had that was extremely positive? Did you have a conversation that really stood out to you where you were just really happy afterwards?
You know what? The conversations probably that made me really happy was when I spoke to recent graduates or entrants into the industry about the sort of passion and drive that they sort of came into the industry with. And I think that, the threat landscape is constantly causing a lot of concern, but I like to always try and stay optimistic. And so I think that sort of feeling that as an industry, we're attracting a lot of extremely smart talent into the industry that are going to do great things on the defense side. I think that was for me something that made me happy and made me smile after the conversations that I had.
I love that answer. Yeah, I was expecting that. That's a great point, though. It's true. It really is all about people. It comes back to the talent that's being drawn into this industry, and I think that's a great point. How about conversations that were a little surprising? Did you have any conversations that kind of, or see something somewhere that you thought was kind of surprising?
So what surprised me? Well, obviously I was very surprised to see goats, because I didn't associate goats with cybersecurity in the past, although in cybersecurity, we should have learned by now not to be surprised by anything. But what still sort of surprises me sometimes in conversations with security leaders is sometimes the attitude towards the human layer of security, or securing the human layer. Sometimes the attitude is somewhat negative because it's harder to control humans. So I feel that we still have some security leaders who see humans more as annoying than as an asset that the company can use to help defend security, defend the company and basically be part of the cyber workforce as a whole. So I think it's of course understandable that different security leaders have different concerns at different times. And, there's always all sorts of, curveballs being thrown at you. But I think we still have a little bit of work to do to ensure that, as a whole, as an industry, we really maximize how we utilize our collective power as humans to defend against cyber attacks.
Yeah, that's a great point, Nora. And I think that I would say that I had a similar kind of surprising, but also twisted around a positive conversation around that idea of people still having a pretty traditional kind of compliance-based mindset when it comes around the people, the human element. And a lot of the conversations would usually start with, we're basically trying to get compliance. We're basically trying to get people trained just enough to kind of check the box.
Yeah.
But every time they would say that, they had that look on their face like,
it's not
like
enough.
we want to go further.
We
want to go further. Exactly. So that's the big difference that I really interpreted this year, was that the people who were in every conversation about the human element, whether it was at the booth or whether it was at a bar or whether it was at a keynote, people wanted to go further. People know that there's another way out there.
Yeah.
Or that there must be. And so often the conversation would go, we're using, a name your legacy big time SAT tool. We all know the big three. We can say them by name, but we don't need to. We're using this. We've gotten to a certain point. It's okay, but we're just stuck. We're just stagnant. We're not moving forward. Our engagement's not going up. There's negligible threat reporting. There's really very little behavioral metrics around our program that would prove it's actually doing anything. We don't really have any positive feedback from our user base or from really anybody, but we are checking the box. We just want to know if there is something else out there. How can we use AI to automate our program so it gets better? So it's more like there's people are in that kind of like searching and discovery phase that I thought was really encouraging, actually, because it does take a while to adopt a new way of doing things. And I even had, for the first time, really, a couple conversations around something that you know very intimately. And you talk to so many analysts, tier 1 and tier 2 analysts, about something that's been called human risk management.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you had any conversations this year around that term or around this emerging category, but I was surprised that for the first time, a couple people brought it up to me.
I think you're spot on. I think more and more people are talking about human risk management in those terms, or using that term. But I think it still means different things to different people, and I think that's great, and I think that's natural, and I think it goes to show there's so many different layers and aspects to the human side of security. But I do agree with you. It's definitely I see positive signs as well in terms of moving past that. Like, there's got to be more than just doing the bare minimum if we're still seeing, the risks materialize. So we've got to be able to do more. And I certainly see positive changes there as well, as you've said.
One surprising trend that I noticed at RSA that I hadn't seen so much before were the number of governments that were actually trying to get beyond the compliance status. They wanted to get to a point where they were actually measurably reducing risk, and multiple governments, mostly state governments, a lot from California, naturally, since RSA is in San Francisco, had conversations about ways to use training to measurably impact their risk posture. And that was really encouraging. Typically, that's not what we've seen so often, because when you go beyond the compliance way of doing things, it gets a little bit more resource intensive, let's say. And I was really encouraged the fact that the different state governments were out there really trying to find a new way of doing things that would measurably impact risk. And I think that also goes to maybe show a larger trend that governments are taking a larger ownership of the outcomes. And also they understand breaches happen with people. And when a breach happens at the government level, it's a critical infrastructure breach. It's a real problematic thing. So that was one thing I found to be very, very encouraging that I saw. I think tying a bow on AI is that The vendors who said that they had AI were typically kind of a bolted-on marketing type thing. A lot of people have automation. A lot of people have different kinds of smart flows where the platform will go through a logic tree. That's not necessarily AI. And people who weren't native AI in the platform calling themselves AI, it gets sussed out pretty quickly by the security leaders that it's just a little bit of fluff and it might be kind of empty marketing talk there. They know pretty quickly if something is actually incorporating generative AI or if it's incorporating machine learning or the different versions of AI. So people who are saying that they are AI and they're not, that's going to be kind of a problem for you once you get to the demo stage of your product. Also, I would go to the next step is that the fact that people are even bothering saying they have AI in their platform is just kind of silly. It's kind of like being in like 2001 and saying that you have digital capabilities, that you are somehow participating in the internet. Like, of course you are. If you're not, then that's sort of negligent. And we're sort of in a funny crossroads, kind of like in 2018, where all of a sudden everybody said that they were on the blockchain, whether they were or not, or whether it made any sense whatsoever for someone to actually be on blockchain. You're sort of seeing that with AI now too. But the difference being that with AI, it's kind of impossible not to have AI in your product or in your offering, because it really is going to impact everything in ways that blockchain was not going to do. It'll impact everything for virtually every use case out there. So if you're saying that you're using AI, it's kind of like, well, duh. I mean, of course, I think you kind of have to use AI to stay up, to just current with the times. But the question is, are you actually using AI in an intelligent way that differentiates your offering from others? Are you using it in a way that lets your service provide more value than any other service in that category by using AI in a smart way? So that's going to be a big difference. Fantastic. Well, the category is evolving. The threatscape is evolving. We're trying to stay ahead, and I think that we have a lot of positive signals that we are able to do that. So that's our time for this conversation today on all things human risk management. Thank you so much for joining me today, Nora. It's been a pleasure.
It's been awesome, as always. Thank you so much, Elliot.